"Put the belt down, Martha. I won't tell you again." Liam's voice didn't boom. It vibrated through the floorboards of the rotting porch like a low-frequency warning. He stood in the mud of the driveway, a tower of flannel and scarred leather. His eyes locked on the woman trembling with rage in the doorway. Martha gripped the leather strap tighter, her knuckles white. "She's my daughter, my blood. You stay out of family business, mountain man." Behind her, Olivia collapsed against the door frame, a fresh crimson welt blooming across her cheekbone, her eyes glassy with a soul-deep exhaustion. Liam stepped onto the first stair, the wood groaning under his weight. "Family stops being business when you're trying to break her spirit. She's coming with me, now." The sun didn't so much rise over the Blackwood Ridge as it did seep through the gray mist like a bruise. For Olivia, the light was never a welcome guest. It was a countdown. It meant the whiskey in the kitchen would be gone, the floor would be cold, and the woman who had birthed her would be looking for someone to blame for the dampness in the air. Olivia moved through the small, cramped house with the practiced silence of a ghost. She knew which floorboards creaked and which hinges screamed. She was 22, but in this house she felt like a child perpetually trapped in a corner. She adjusted the thick wool scarf around her neck, even though the kitchen was sweltering from the wood stove. It wasn't for warmth. It was for the yellowing finger marks on her throat from the night before. "Where do you think you're going?" The voice was raspy, thin, and sharp as a razor. Martha sat at the small linoleum table, a cigarette burning down to the filter in a chipped glass tray. Her hair was a wild, unwashed halo of gray blonde, and her eyes, the same deep sea blue as Olivia's, were clouded with a bitterness that had fermented for decades. "General store, Ma," Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible. "We're out of flour. And your medicine." "Medicine?" Martha spat the word. "You mean the only thing that keeps my nerves from jumping out of my skin because of your incompetence? Hurry back, and don't you go talking to anyone. People in this town don't need to hear your lies." Olivia didn't respond. A response was an invitation for a lecture, and a lecture always ended in a hand or a household object finding its way to her skin. She grabbed the rusted keys to the old truck and stepped out into the mountain air. The drive into town was 5 miles of winding, potholed dirt roads. To anyone else, the Appalachian landscape was a postcard of rugged beauty. To Olivia, the mountains were the bars of a very large cage. She pulled the truck into the gravel lot of Miller's General Store, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. Inside, the bell chimed. It was a sound she usually dreaded because it drew eyes. But today, the store was mostly empty, save for a man standing by the hardware section. He was tall, impossibly so, with a beard the color of dark oak and shoulders that seemed to take up the entire aisle. Liam, the mountain man. The locals told stories about him, a former soldier who had bought the old surveyor's cabin at the highest peak and lived there in total isolation for 5 years. He only came down for supplies, and he never spoke more than 3 words at a time. Olivia kept her head down, grabbing a bag of flour. As she reached for a jar of honey on a higher shelf, her sleeve slipped. The purple and black mottled skin of her forearm was exposed for just a second. She felt a gaze. It wasn't the judging gaze of the town gossips. It was heavy, like a physical weight. She looked up, and for the first time, her eyes met Liam's. They weren't cold. They were observant, terrifyingly so. He didn't look away. He looked at the bruise, then back at her eyes, and then at the scarf covering her neck. Olivia bolted. She dumped the flour on the counter, threw some crumpled bills at the cashier, and ran back to the truck. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. He saw, he knew, and in her world, when people knew, things only got worse. The afternoon brought a storm, the kind that turned the mountain trails into slide zones of mud and rock. Inside the house, the atmosphere was even more volatile. Martha had found a hidden $10 bill in Olivia's coat pocket. Money Olivia had been saving for 3 months, a literal penny at a time, hoping to buy a bus ticket to the city. "Stealing from me?" Martha screamed, the sound echoing off the thin walls. After everything I sacrificed? I could have left you at the hospital. I could have been someone if I wasn't tethered to a pathetic, ungrateful brat. Olivia stood by the sink, her head bowed. It was for the bills, Ma. I was going to surprise you. Liar! The first strike was a ceramic mug. It shattered against the wall behind Olivia's head, shards of pottery grazing her ear. Olivia didn't move. Experience had taught her that running only lengthened the hunt. Martha moved with a frenetic, jagged energy. She grabbed Olivia by the hair, pulling her head back. You think you're better than me? Because you're young. Because you still have your looks. No, Ma. Shut up! Martha reached for the leather belt hanging on the back of the kitchen chair. The beating that followed was different. It wasn't the usual quick flash of anger. It was a systematic release of all the failures Martha had ever felt. Olivia felt the sting against her legs, her back, her arms. She curled into a ball on the kitchen floor, biting her tongue until she tasted copper, refusing to give her mother the satisfaction of a scream. Suddenly, the front door, which was usually locked, was kicked open with such force that the frame splintered. The rain roared into the house, and with it came the shadow. Liam stood there, drenched, his boots caked in mud. He looked like a force of nature that had decided to take human form. Martha froze, the belt raised high. Who the hell do you think you are? Get out of my house! Liam didn't look at Martha. His eyes were on the floor, where Olivia lay shivering, her shirt torn, the evidence of the family business written in red welts across her skin. He walked into the kitchen. He didn't run. He walked with a terrifying, deliberate pace. He reached out and wrapped his hand around the belt, wrenching it out of Martha's grip with a single, effortless flick of his wrist. She's coming with me, Liam said. His voice was a low growl, vibrating with a rage that was tightly, precariously controlled. I'll call the sheriff! You're kidnapping her! Martha shrieked, backing into the counter. Call him, Liam said, tossing the belt into the wood stove where it began to sizzle and smoke. Tell him to come up to the ridge. I'll show him what I found here. I'll show him the girl you've been using as a punching bag for 20 years. Liam looked down at Olivia. He reached out a hand. It was a massive hand, calloused and rough, but it remained perfectly still. Olivia, he said. It was the first time she had ever heard him say her name. Get up, we're leaving. Olivia looked at her mother, who was now weeping crocodile tears, leaning against the sink. Then she looked at the mountain man. She didn't know him. He could be a monster for all she knew. But he wasn't the monster she was currently living with. She reached out and took his hand. The drive up the mountain was silent, save for the rhythmic slap of the windshield wipers. Liam's truck was old but meticulously maintained, the interior smelling of cedar and gun oil. Olivia sat huddled against the passenger door, her body shaking so hard her teeth rattled. There's a blanket in the back, Liam said, his eyes fixed on the treacherous road. Olivia reached back, finding a heavy, hand-knitted wool blanket. She wrapped it around herself, the warmth doing nothing to settle the ice in her marrow. Every time the truck jolted over a rock, she flinched, expecting a blow. I'm not going to hurt you, Liam said after a few minutes. He didn't look at her. I know you don't have a reason to believe that, but you're safe here. Why? She whispered. Liam didn't answer for a long time. He turned the truck onto a narrow path that seemed to disappear into the clouds. Because I don't like bullies, and I don't like seeing things broken that were meant to be whole. They reached the cabin. It was a sturdy structure of stone and heavy timber, perched on a cliffside that looked out over the entire valley. Inside, a fire was already burning in a massive stone hearth. The room was simple: a bed, a large table covered in maps and books, and a small kitchenette. The bathroom is through that door, Liam said, pointing. There are clean clothes on the counter. They'll be big on you, but they're warm. Wash up. I'll make some tea. Olivia moved like a sleepwalker. In the bathroom, she peeled off her ruined clothes. In the mirror, the damage was undeniable. She looked like a map of a war zone. She stepped into the shower, the hot water stinging her cuts. But she didn't cry. She had forgotten how to cry years ago. When she came out, dressed in a massive gray hoodie and sweatpants that she had to tie tight at the waist, she found Liam sitting by the fire. He had a first aid kit open on the table. "Sit," he commanded gently. She sat. He moved with a surprising delicacy, cleaning the cut on her ear and the welts on her arms with antiseptic. His touch was clinical, respectful. He didn't linger. "She'll come for me," Olivia said, her voice trembling. "She always does. She says I'm the only thing she has left. She says I owe her." Liam stopped, his hand hovering near her shoulder. He looked her directly in the eye. "You don't owe anyone your life, Olivia, especially not someone who tries to take it from you an inch at a time. You don't know her. She's smart. She'll tell the police I'm unstable. She'll tell them I ran away because I'm sick." "Let her," Liam said, closing the first aid kit with a snap. "Let her tell the world whatever she wants. She has to get past me to get to you, and that is something she is not capable of doing." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the storm. Olivia watched his silhouette, a man who had chosen to live in the clouds to escape something of his own. She realized then that he wasn't just her protector. He was a man who understood the need to disappear. "Sleep in the bed," Liam said, gesturing to the corner. "I'll be in the chair by the door." "I can't take your bed," Olivia protested. "It wasn't a request," he said, though there was no malice in it. As Olivia crawled under the heavy furs of the bed, she watched Liam sit in the wooden chair, a rifle leaning against the wall beside him. For the first time in her life, the silence of the night didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a shield. But as the wind howled outside, a new fear began to take root. Who was this man, really? And what happened to the people who tried to cross him? The mystery of Liam was just beginning, and the storm in the valley was far from over. The first thing Olivia noticed when she woke up was the absence of sound. There was no rattling of empty whiskey bottles, no hacking cough from the kitchen, and no dread tightening in her chest like a physical knot. Instead, there was only the low, rhythmic crackle of the wood stove and the distant muffled call of a hawk circling the ridge. She lay still for a long time, staring at the heavy timber beams of the ceiling. The bed was softer than anything she had ever known, smelling faintly of cedar and sun-dried cotton. For a terrifying second, she thought she was dead. Peace was such a foreign concept that it felt like it could only exist in the afterlife. She sat up, her body screaming in protest. The bruises had begun to stiffen, turning a deep, angry plum color. She looked toward the chair by the door. Liam was gone, but his presence remained in the neatly folded stack of clothes left on the edge of the table and a steaming mug of tea. Stepping onto the floor, she felt the warmth of the rug beneath her feet. She moved to the window. Outside, the world was a jagged masterpiece of green and gray. Liam was about 50 yards away, his back to the cabin. He was splitting wood, the heavy maul rising and falling with a terrifying, rhythmic precision. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders. The way he moved suggested a man who was always expecting a strike, even when he was the one delivering it. Olivia dressed in the oversized flannel shirt and work pants he'd provided, rolling the sleeves and cuffs multiple times. She stepped out onto the porch, the cold mountain air hitting her lungs like a tonic. Liam didn't turn around, but he stopped mid-swing. "There's oatmeal on the stove. Eat." "I should help," Olivia said, her voice sounding thin in the vastness of the ridge. I don't know how to just sit." Liam drove the maul into a stump and finally turned. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a calloused hand, his eyes scanning her face, checking the bandage on her ear. "You've been helping your mother survive her own failures for 20 years, Olivia. Today, your only job is to exist." "She's going to the sheriff, Liam," she said, stepping off the porch. "I know how she works. She won't just let me go. I'm her audience. I'm the only one who sees her suffering. Without me, she's just an old woman alone in a rotting house." Liam walked toward her, his stature casting a long shadow over the gravel. "Let her go to the sheriff. I've lived on this mountain for 5 years, and I haven't broken a law yet. But I've seen what she did to you. The law has a funny way of changing its mind when it sees the evidence." "You don't understand this town," Olivia whispered, looking down at her boots. "She's lived there her whole life. You're the crazy veteran on the hill. Who do you think they'll believe? Liam reached out, his thumb catching her chin, gently forcing her to look up. His eyes weren't just protective. They were ancient, filled with a knowledge of combat that went far beyond mountain skirmishes. They don't have to believe me. They just have to be unable to move me. Now go eat. As Olivia retreated back inside, she didn't see the way Liam's hand tightened into a fist until the knuckles turned white. He knew she was right. In the valley, blood was thicker than justice. But on the ridge, the only thing that mattered was the strength of the stone. Down in the valley, at that very moment, Martha was not weeping. She sat in the sheriff's office, her face carefully composed into a mask of maternal agony. She had used a bit of stage makeup to emphasize a small bruise on her own arm, a bruise she'd gotten by bumping into the stove, and she was currently holding the hand of Deputy Miller, a man she had known since he was in diapers. "He just took her, Roy," Martha sobbed, the sound perfectly pitched to trigger a man's protective instincts. "He came in with a gun, screaming about how the mountain needed a queen. My poor Olivia. She was so scared. You know how she is, so fragile, so easily led." Deputy Miller looked uneasy. He knew Liam was a quiet man, but he also knew the rumors. "Martha, Liam hasn't caused a lick of trouble in 5 years. Why would he suddenly snatch Olivia?" "Because he's a monster!" Martha shrieked, then quickly lowered her voice to a pathetic whimper. "He's been watching her at the store. I saw him. Please, Roy. If something happens to my girl, I'll never forgive myself. He's dangerous. You know what they say about those men who come back from the desert with ghosts in their heads." Miller sighed, reaching for his hat. "I'll go up there, but I'm taking a backup. If he's as armed as you say, I'm not walking into a buzzsaw alone." Martha watched him leave, the tears drying instantly. She didn't want Olivia back because she loved her. She wanted her back because she needed the target. And more than that, she wanted to see the mountain man broken. Nobody took what was hers. By the afternoon, the cabin felt less like a prison and more like a fortress. Liam had taught Olivia how to stoke the fire and how to use the hand pump for water. He spoke little, but when he did, the words felt heavy, like they had been weighed and measured before being released. While Liam was out checking his perimeter traps, Olivia found herself standing before the small mantle. There were no trophies there, no typical decorations. Just a single tarnished brass shell casing and a photograph tucked behind a heavy iron candle holder. She pulled the photo out. It was a group of men in desert camouflage, their faces obscured by dust and goggles. But she recognized the man in the center instantly. He was younger, his beard shorter, but the way he stood, shoulders back, a slight tilt to the head as if listening for a distant sound, was unmistakable. Beside him was a smaller man, smiling widely, an arm slung over Liam's shoulder. That was Caleb. Olivia jumped, the photo nearly slipping from her fingers. Liam was standing in the doorway, his silhouette blocking out the sun. He didn't look angry, but his voice was hollow. "I'm sorry," Olivia said, quickly trying to put the photo back. "I shouldn't have been prying. It's a piece of paper, Olivia, not a state secret." He walked over and took the photo from her. He looked at it for a long time, his thumb tracing the face of the smiling man. Caleb was my spotter. He was 19, thought the world was a giant adventure. He used to talk about opening a bakery when we got back. Said he wanted to smell something other than cordite and diesel. "What happened?" Olivia asked softly. Liam's jaw tightened. The silence stretched until it felt like it might snap. "The world isn't built for bakers. It's built for the people who burn the bread." He tucked the photo back behind the candle holder. "I brought him home in a flag. I stayed there for 2 more years after that, trying to find the man who did it. I found him. And then I realized that finding him didn't bring the smell of bread back." He looked at her then, and for the first time, she saw the ghosts Martha had mentioned. They weren't madness. They were a profound, aching weariness. "You're not the only one who's lived in a house that felt like a grave," Liam said. "The only difference is, I chose my grave. You were born into yours." The moment was broken by the sound of an engine, 2 engines, straining up the steep incline of the ridge. Liam didn't panic. He moved with a terrifying fluidness. He grabbed his rifle from the wall and checked the chamber. "Go to the cellar. There's a bolt on the inside." "Liam, don't!" Olivia pleaded, grabbing his arm. "If you fight them, they'll lock you away. That's what she wants." "I'm not going to fight them unless they try to take you," he said, his voice dropping to that low, vibrating frequency. "But they aren't taking you. Not today. Not ever." "Please," she whispered, "let me talk to them. If they see I'm okay." "They won't see you're okay. They'll see a girl who's been brainwashed by a hermit. They'll see exactly what your mother told them to see." He gently pried her hand off his arm. "The cellar, Olivia. Now." She did as she was told, her heart hammering against her ribs. As she descended into the cool, dark earth beneath the floorboards, she heard the screech of brakes and the slamming of car doors. Liam stood on the porch, the rifle held loosely across his chest in a low, ready position. He didn't look like a kidnapper. He looked like a king defending a border. Deputy Miller and a younger officer, a man named Henderson, who had a reputation for being trigger-happy, stepped out of their cruisers. They both had their hands on their holsters. "Liam, put the weapon down!" Miller shouted, his voice echoing off the rock face. "You're on my land, Roy." Liam called back, his voice calm. "And you're violating a man's peace. State your business and get off the ridge." "We're here for Olivia Vance," Miller said, taking a cautious step forward. "Her mother filed a report, said you took her by force. We just want to see her, Liam. Make sure she's all right." "She's more than all right," Liam said. "She's finally breathing, which is more than she was doing in that house with Martha." "That's not for you to decide," Henderson barked, his hand twitching near his pistol. "You're a civilian. You don't get to play judge and jury. Bring her out, or we're coming in." Liam's eyes shifted to Henderson. The temperature on the porch seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Step on my stairs, son, and you'll find out exactly how much of a civilian I am. I'm giving you one warning. Turn those cars around." "Liam, don't do this," Miller pleaded. "If you resist, I have to call in the state boys. It'll turn into a circus. If she's here of her own will, just let her say so." Inside the cellar, Olivia could hear everything through the cracks in the floorboards. She saw the light flickering between the wood. She knew Liam was seconds away from a mistake that would end his life, or ensure he spent the rest of it in a cage. And she knew she was the only one who could stop it. She threw back the cellar bolt and scrambled up the ladder. "Stop!" she screamed, bursting through the front door and onto the porch. Both officers drew their weapons instinctively. Liam stepped in front of her, his body a literal wall of muscle and flannel. "Don't shoot!" Miller yelled at Henderson. "Hold your fire!" Olivia stepped out from behind Liam, her hands raised. The wind whipped her hair across her face, revealing the stark, unmistakable bruises on her neck and the welt on her cheek. "I'm here!" she cried out. "I wasn't kidnapped! I ran! I asked him to take me!" Miller stared at her, even from 30 feet away. The marks of abuse were clear. The fragile, easily led girl Martha had described didn't match the woman standing there with fire in her eyes. "Olivia," Miller said, his voice softening. "Your mama said—" "My mama lied!" Olivia shouted. She pulled back her sleeve, exposing the mottled purple of her forearm. "She did this. She's been doing this every day since I was 10 years old. Liam didn't kidnap me. He saved me. Are you going to arrest the man who saved me, or are you going to go down that hill and arrest the woman who broke my ribs last Christmas?" The silence that followed was heavy. Henderson looked at Miller, his bravado fading. Miller looked at Liam, who hadn't lowered his rifle an inch. "I can't just leave it, Olivia," Miller said finally. "There's a report. You're an adult, so you can stay where you want. But you have to come down and sign a statement, in person, at the station." "No," Liam said. "She's not going back down to that town where everyone looked the other way for a decade. You want a statement? Bring the papers up here, or I'll have a lawyer from the city meet you at the county line." Miller looked at the mountain man, then at the girl whose life had been a series of silent screams. He knew the politics of the town. He knew Martha was a pillar of the church. But he also saw the truth written in the scars on Olivia's skin. "Fine," Miller said, pointing a finger at Liam. But if I hear one word, one whisper, that she's being held here against her will, I'm coming back with the National Guard. Do you hear me?" "I hear you, Roy," Liam said, finally lowering the rifle. "But you better bring a lot of men, because I'm not letting her go back to that hellhole." As the cruisers backed down the driveway, Olivia felt the strength leave her legs. She collapsed onto the porch, her head in her hands. Liam knelt beside her, not saying a word. He didn't offer a platitude. He just put a heavy, warm hand on her shoulder. "You did good," he whispered. "It's not over," Olivia sobbed. "She'll find another way. She always finds another way." "Let her try," Liam said, his eyes fixed on the valley below, where the lights of the town were beginning to twinkle like deceptive stars. "She's playing a game of checkers. She doesn't realize the board is already on fire." But as the sun dipped below the ridge, Olivia noticed something Liam hadn't. A third set of tire tracks in the mud at the edge of the driveway. Someone had been there before the police. Someone who wasn't a deputy. The mountain was no longer a secret, and the real hunt was about to begin. The third set of tire tracks hadn't been a hallucination of the mist. Liam spent the hours after the deputies left crouched by the edge of the gravel drive, his fingers tracing the deep, aggressive tread of a heavy-duty mud tire. It wasn't a police vehicle, and it wasn't a local's rusted-out work truck. This was someone who came prepared for the terrain, and someone who didn't want to be seen. "Who do you think it was?" Olivia asked, standing on the porch. She was wearing one of Liam's heavy wool sweaters, her small frame swallowed by the garment. The wind was picking up, whispering through the pines like a warning. Liam stood up, his face a mask of granite. "Martha didn't just go to the police, Olivia. She's a smart woman. She knew the law might look at your bruises and hesitate. She's brought in a contingency." "Silas," Olivia whispered, the name tasting like ash. Liam looked at her sharply. "Who is Silas?" "My mother's cousin. He's not like the rest of the family. He spent time in state prison for extortion. People in town pay him to make problems disappear. If she's called him, she's not looking to rescue me anymore. She's looking to punish us both." Liam didn't look afraid. He looked focused. He began to move around the perimeter of the cabin, checking the heavy shutters he had built and the tension on the wire trips he'd set in the tree line. "I've dealt with fixers before, Olivia. They usually rely on fear. They don't expect a target that knows how to hunt back." The rest of the afternoon was a study in controlled tension. Liam moved with a lethal grace, preparing the cabin as if it were an outpost in a hostile territory. He showed Olivia how to use the back exit, a small door hidden behind a woodpile that led directly into a rocky crevice. "If I tell you to run, you go through that crevice. It leads to a cave about half a mile up. You wait there. You don't come back until you hear me whistle 3 times. Understood?" "I'm not leaving you, Liam," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "You're in this because of me." "I'm in this because I chose to be," he corrected, stopping to look at her. The setting sun caught the scars on his neck, the remnants of a life he had tried to bury. "For 5 years, I've been hiding on this mountain, waiting for a reason to feel like a man again instead of a ghost. You gave me that. Don't take it away by being stubborn." As night fell, the mountain became a place of deep, impenetrable shadows. The storm that had been brewing in the valley finally broke over the ridge, bringing with it a freezing rain that turned the mud to ice. Inside, they sat in the dark. Liam refused to light a lamp, explaining that light was just a target. They sat by the dying embers of the hearth, the only sound the lashing rain against the timber. Olivia found herself watching Liam. In the dim light, he looked less like a mountain man and more like a sentinel. "And why did you really come for me?" she asked softly. "You saw me at the store for 5 minutes. You could have just kept walking." Liam stayed silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice barely a murmur. "In the service, we had a rule: leave no one behind. I left a lot of people behind, Olivia, men I loved, people I couldn't save. When I saw you in that store, I didn't see a stranger. I saw the one person I had the power to actually bring home. Saving you, it's the only thing I've done in a decade that made the noise in my head stop." Suddenly, the silence was shattered. A sharp snap echoed from the north side of the cabin. Not a branch breaking from the wind. The metallic click of a tripwire being triggered. Liam was on his feet in a heartbeat, his rifle already in his hands. "He's here!" A voice boomed through the rain, amplified by a megaphone. It was a jagged, cruel sound that sliced through the darkness. "Liam, this is Silas Thorne. I'm standing here with your guest's mother. She's very concerned about her daughter's well-being." Olivia huddled near the fireplace, her breath hitching. "He's got her out there, in the rain." "It's a tactic," Liam hissed. "He wants me to feel sorry for her, or he wants you to feel guilty. Stay down." "Let the girl out, Liam," Silas's voice continued. "The sheriff is a friend of mine, but he's a slow-moving man. Me? I'm not so patient. I've got 3 men with me. We don't want to fight. We just want what belongs to Martha." "I don't belong to her," Olivia screamed, her voice cracking. "She heard you, honey," Silas laughed. "Now, don't make this hard. Liam, you're a hero, right? A big war hero? Don't let this girl get hurt because you're playing house." A brick smashed through the high window, sending glass raining down onto the floor. It was followed by a flare, a blinding, sputtering red light that hissed on the rug, filling the cabin with a demonic glow and thick, acrid smoke. "They're trying to smoke us out," Liam said. He grabbed a heavy blanket and smothered the flare. "Olivia, the crevice, now! No! Go!" he roared, but it was too late. The front door didn't splinter this time. It exploded. Silas had used a small breaching charge, a trick he'd likely learned from the same circles Liam had once moved in. The force threw Liam backward against the table. 2 men rushed in through the smoke, their faces covered in balaclavas. Liam met the first one with the butt of his rifle, a sickening crunch echoing through the room. He spun, kicking the second man in the chest, sending him flying back out into the rain. But Silas was smarter. He didn't come through the front. He appeared at the side window, his pistol aimed directly at Olivia. "Freeze, soldier boy!" Silas yelled. Liam stopped, his rifle leveled at the door, his chest heaving. He looked over at Silas, then at Olivia. Silas was a wiry man with a hawk-like nose and eyes that held no empathy. Behind him, standing in the rain, was Martha. She stepped into the doorway, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes wild with a terrifying triumph. "I told you, Olivia. I told you nobody leaves me." Martha walked toward Olivia, her hand raised. Not for a hug, but for the familiar strike. "You think this man loves you? He's a broken killer. He'll get bored of you in a week and throw you off this cliff. Come here." Olivia looked at her mother. For 12 years, this woman had been her entire world. A world of pain, shame, and fear. She looked at the hand that had beaten her daily. Then she looked at Liam, who was staring at Silas's gun, his muscles coiled like a spring, ready to die to give her a split-second chance to run. "No," Olivia said. The word was small, but it carried the weight of a mountain. "What did you say?" Martha hissed. "I said no." Olivia stood up, ignoring the gun pointed at her. She walked toward Martha until they were inches apart. "You didn't sacrifice anything for me, Ma. You used me. You used me to feel powerful because you felt small. You didn't love me. You loved having something you could break." "You're mine!" Martha shrieked, reaching for Olivia's throat. In that moment, the cabin erupted. Liam moved. He didn't fire his rifle. He dived for Silas, knocking the pistol upward as it discharged, the bullet burying itself in the ceiling. They crashed through the window, tumbling into the mud and ice outside. Inside, Olivia caught her mother's wrists. For the first time, she was stronger. She wasn't the shaking girl in the kitchen. She was the woman who had survived the ridge. She pushed Martha back, not with hatred, but with a final, chilling indifference. Martha fell into the shattered glass on the floor, wailing, "Roy! Roy, help me! He's killing Silas!" But Roy Miller wasn't coming. The lights of 3 more cruisers appeared on the road below. Liam hadn't just relied on his traps. He had used the satellite phone in his basement to call the state police the moment Silas's truck hit the ridge. He knew the local deputies were compromised. He had gone over their heads. Outside, the fight was brutal and short. Silas was a brawler, but Liam was a machine. By the time the state troopers reached the porch, Silas was face down in the mud, and Liam was standing over him, his face bruised and bloody, but his eyes calm. The aftermath was a blur of blue lights and cold coffee. The state police didn't play favorites. They saw the breaching charges, the illegal firearms Silas had brought, and they saw the documented history of calls to the Vance household that had been resolved without action by the local department. Martha was led away in handcuffs, still screaming about her rights and her medicine. She didn't look like a villain anymore. She looked like a small, pathetic shadow of a human being. Silas was taken away in an ambulance, facing enough felony charges to keep him in a cell for a decade. The sun began to rise, not gray and bruised this time, but a brilliant, searing gold that turned the frost on the trees into diamonds. Liam stood on the edge of the porch, a bandage over his eye. He looked exhausted. Olivia came out to stand beside him. She was wearing her own clothes now, clean, simple, and for the first time, they didn't feel like a shroud. "The state police said they'll need me for the deposition in the city," she said. "They offered me a place in a shelter there." Liam nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's a good city, plenty of bakeries, like Caleb wanted." Olivia looked at him. "Is that what you want? For me to go?" Liam finally turned to her. The mountain man persona had cracked, revealing the man beneath, a man who was still healing, but no longer hiding. "I want you to be where you're safe, Olivia. I want you to be where nobody can ever raise a hand to you again." "I was safe here," she said softly. She reached out and took his hand. His palm was rough, scarred, and strong. He didn't pull away. He squeezed her hand, a silent promise. "The cabin is a bit small for two," Liam said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "And it needs a new door, and a window, and probably a lot less tripwire." "I think we can manage that," Olivia whispered. She leaned her head against his shoulder. The mountain was still there, rugged and indifferent, but it no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a foundation. Below them, the valley was waking up, but they were above it all, breathing the thin, clean air of a life they had fought for together. The family business was finally closed. Conclusion. In the heart of the Appalachian mist, two broken souls found that the strongest fortresses aren't made of stone, but of the courage to stand for one another. Olivia's journey from victim to survivor, and Liam's path from ghost to protector, reminds us that no matter how deep the bruises, the light always finds a way through the cracks. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear that they aren't alone. Like and subscribe for more grounded, emotional dramas that explore the resilience of the human spirit. Your support helps us tell the stories that matter. The transition from the rugged isolation of the ridge to the sterile, fluorescent-lit halls of the county courthouse was a sensory shock that nearly broke Olivia's resolve. The air in the city felt thin, lacking the scent of pine and the weight of the mountain. She sat in the witness room, her fingers tracing the smooth, polished wood of the bench, her heart a frantic bird trapped in a cage of ribs. Liam stood by the window, his presence a dark, immovable anchor in the sea of bureaucratic gray. He had traded his flannel for a dark button-down shirt that looked uncomfortably tight across his shoulders. His beard trimmed, but his eyes as sharp and watchful as ever. "You don't have to look at her," Liam said, his voice a low vibration that seemed to steady the room. "You look at the prosecutor, you look at the back wall, or you look at me. She doesn't have power here, Olivia. These walls are built to keep people like her in, not to let them out." "She'll look at me like I'm the one who failed," Olivia whispered. "She has that way of making the truth feel like a lie." The door opened, and a young woman in a sharp suit, the assistant district attorney, stepped in. "It's time, Olivia. We're ready for your testimony." Walking into the courtroom felt like walking into a firing squad. Martha sat at the defense table, her hair neatly coiffed, wearing a modest floral dress that screamed, "Wronged grandmother." She looked fragile, her eyes downcast, a masterclass in performative victimhood. Beside her sat a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. As Olivia took the stand and raised her hand, She felt the familiar chill of Martha's gaze. It was a physical weight, a cold needle pressing against the back of her neck. The questioning began. The prosecutor was methodical, guiding Olivia through the years of silence, the accidents in the kitchen, the hidden bruises, the psychological games. With every detail, Olivia felt a layer of shame peel away. She spoke about the belt, the ceramic mug, and the final, terrifying night on the ridge. "And when the defendant reached for your throat," the prosecutor asked, "what did you feel?" Olivia paused. She looked past the lawyers, past the judge, and found Liam in the third row. He wasn't nodding or smiling. He was just there, a living testament to the fact that she had survived. "I didn't feel fear," Olivia said, her voice growing stronger, echoing off the high ceilings. "For the first time in 12 years, I felt nothing. I realized she was just a person. A small, angry person who had run out of room to hide." The defense's cross-examination was a desperate attempt to paint Olivia as emotionally unstable and Liam as a predatory influence. But the evidence, the medical records Liam had insisted on obtaining, the photos of the breaching charges Silas had used, and the recorded calls from the satellite phone, was an iron wall. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, including aggravated assault and witness intimidation, Martha didn't scream. She just sat there, her mask finally slipping to reveal a hollow, bitter emptiness. As she was led away in shackles, she tried to catch Olivia's eye one last time. Olivia looked away. The cord was finally cut. Back on the ridge, the healing wasn't a sudden event. It was a slow, deliberate construction. Liam had spent the weeks following the trial rebuilding the cabin. The new door was solid oak, reinforced with steel plates, and the shattered window was replaced with thick, insulated glass that allowed the mountain sun to flood the room. But the physical repairs were the easy part. Olivia found herself waking up in the middle of the night, reaching for the bedside table to make sure the medicine wasn't empty, or flinching when Liam dropped a heavy log by the fire. Recovery was a ghost that haunted the corners of her mind. One afternoon, Liam found her sitting on the porch, staring at a small patch of dirt where the first spring wildflowers were beginning to poke through the thaw. "I don't know who I am without the fear, Liam," she said, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I've spent my whole life being the girl who gets hit. Now that I'm not, I feel like a blank page. It's terrifying." Liam sat down beside her, leaning his back against the stone pillar. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wooden object. It was a bird, a hawk, carved from a piece of cedar. The lines were rough, but the spirit of the animal was captured in the tilt of its head. "I started carving these when I first came back from the desert," Liam said, handing it to her. The wood was just a hunk of scrap. It had knots, it had rot, it had scars from where the saw bit too deep. But you don't look at the scars when it's finished. You look at the bird. The scars are just part of how it got its shape. Olivia took the carving, her thumb tracing the grain. "Did the noise ever stop for you? The noise of the things you saw?" "It doesn't stop," Liam admitted. "But it gets quieter. You learn to play a different song over it. You learn that the past is a place you visit, not a place you live." He looked at her then, his eyes softening in a way that only happened when they were alone on the ridge. "You're not a blank page, Olivia. You're the author now. You get to decide what the next chapter looks like. And if you want that chapter to be about flowers or books, or just sitting on this porch until the sun goes down, then that's what it'll be." That evening, they didn't sit in the dark. Liam lit 3 oil lamps, and Olivia pulled out a stack of books she had bought in the city. They sat in a comfortable, companionable silence. 2 survivors who had found a way to turn a fortress into a home. A year passed, a cycle of seasons that saw the ridge transform from a battlefield into a sanctuary. The mysterious tire tracks were long gone, replaced by a garden that Olivia had painstakingly cultivated. The local townspeople, once wary of the mountain man, had begun to treat them with a quiet, distanced respect the kind reserved for people who had stared down a storm and won. Olivia had started a small business, selling her pressed flower art and Liam's wood carvings at the market in the next county over. She was no longer the fragile girl. Her voice was steady, her posture upright, and the scarves she once used to hide her neck were now just colorful accents of a woman who loved the sun. On a crisp October evening, Liam and Olivia stood on the highest point of the ridge, looking down at the valley. The lights of the town twinkled below, but they felt a world away. "I heard the old Vance house was torn down," Liam said, his arm wrapped around her waist. "The bank sold the land to a developer. They're turning it into a park." Olivia leaned into him, the scent of cedar and wood smoke clinging to his skin. "Good." The earth there needed a rest. It had seen too much. Liam turned her to face him. The ruggedness of his face hadn't changed, but the hardness in his eyes had been replaced by a deep, abiding peace. "I never asked you back then. When I said you were coming with me, I never asked if it was what you really wanted." Olivia reached up, her hand resting against his bearded cheek. "Liam, you didn't just take me with you. You showed me where I belonged. I spent 20 years waiting for someone to say those words. Not because I needed a hero, but because I needed to know that someone saw me. Really saw me." He kissed her then. A slow, deep kiss that tasted of the mountain and the future. There were no more shadows in the woods, no more tripwires in the grass. The ridge was no longer a place to hide. It was a place to live. As they walked back toward the cabin, the light from the windows spilling out onto the gravel, Olivia looked back at the trail. She thought of all the girls still trapped in those quiet, rotting houses in the valley. She knew she couldn't save them all, but she knew that her life was a signal fire, a proof that the cycle could be broken. The mountain man and the girl from the valley had found their peace, and as the first snow of the season began to fall, it covered the world in a blanket of pure, untouched white. The story of Liam and Olivia is a testament to the fact that our past defines where we start, but not where we finish. In the silence of the mountains, they found the strength to rebuild what was broken, and the courage to love despite the scars. If you've enjoyed this journey of healing and resilience, please share this story with those who appreciate a drama that feels real and grounded. Like, share, and subscribe to join our community as we continue to explore the heights and depths of the human experience. Your engagement keeps these stories alive.